welcome to this year's summary of my wanderings for the 2020 election. What started out as a lark in 2008 grew into a personal odyssey that I have repeated every 4 years since. Originally on my scooter, I traveled from San Jose to Washington, D.C., asking and recording the thoughts and stories of the people that I met along the way. It was a defining moment in my life, one that I repeated 4 years later in 2012 on a Greyhound bus, traveling every day, going out through the South and the red states, and returning through as many swing states as I could. And then finally, in 2016, that very historic election, I loaded a mattress in the back of a cargo minivan and did the round trip again, a very similar route to 2012. And I stayed in Walmart parking lots and was really able to focus on rural areas. I learned that by combining a hardship, something to take me out of my comfort zone, and to let go of the things that define me, being a mom, an engineer, a liberal, enabled me to interact with people, to learn their values and beliefs. And along the way, it restored my faith and took away my fears. So this year I set out with the pandemic as my hardship and a challenge out of necessity to eat all my meals out of a cooler in my car, conducting interviews exclusively outdoors, and social distancing at all times. I left San Jose, and while I've kind of learned not to indulge preconceptions, I will confess that this time I found that I was surprised by a lot of what happened. Hard stuff first. For the first time in the last 12 years, most of the people that I met actually would not go on tape. So while I was able to have many conversations, I actually got very few interviews. Previously, I should note that I would say most people, and I'm saying 9 out of 10, previously were absolutely willing to go on tape or on camera. The second thing I saw, in the first, I'd say 10 days, I got to speak with several liberals. This was primarily in red states, but not only were they unwilling to be recorded, how they spoke was a surprise. They tended to speak in lowered voices and in many cases looking around to make sure that people that might be around us would not hear what we were saying. I noted it and moved on. Among the conservatives that I was able to interview, most of them were willing to go on tape. But as the trip went on, it was interesting that I was in parts of the country that I had been to and many times before, and I've known the communities that I was visiting, and they were normally quite vocal about their views and their positions. And this time, suddenly, these same groups of people were not interested in talking about the issues or the election. And so I noted that. But most concerning of all was the effects of the isolation and almost a social bifurcation that I noted in the rural communities. As you know, I tend to focus on small towns. And someone who has spent my entire adult life in urban and suburban areas, I had not realized that my experience of this pandemic was somewhat filtered through that lens. For me, though most of the people around me were compliant, those who were not were most certainly unknown to me, giving me the gift of separation. But imagine in small rural towns where the majority is non-compliant and you know them by name. Likely you have known them their entire lives. Imagine now that you are a vulnerable person who has to get groceries or do the essential things of life. Imagine the social contract that is broken when your own community will not allow you a safe place to get food. Repeat this story for healthcare workers, hotel staff, teachers, the police. It is heartbreaking. We organize as community for safety, fellowship, support, but that all starts by being known. And if it's unsafe, if there is no place for free exchange of ideas, the fabric of a community will fray. So when our town squares and places for debate faded, so did the bonds in those communities. If there was a word that captures 2020 among the people that I met, sadly that word would be fear. Each year I ask the same question and keep a word map on my website. I ask, if you could describe in one word how you feel about this year's election, what would that word be? This year, the most repeated word by far was scared. Hopeful stuff second. People absolutely wanted, needed, could not stop talking. Even in this pandemic, as scared as they were, people were generous with their time and their stories. And in the end, it's those stories that mattered. Because when people ask me, how do you talk to a Trump supporter? It really turned out to be 3 simple steps. I found a common space, something that we shared that made me real to them and them real to me. And then I asked questions and listened. And finally, if I listened closely enough, I could start to see what it is that they really valued. This was separate from the positions that they held or what they believed to be true. It was really about what they wanted and they needed. And what I found was that in almost every case, there were great areas of common values, whether it was love of family, a desire for a fair and equal playing field, and safety, and a hope for a better future for our kids. And when I understood that I had that shared value, it was a little easier to listen and try and understand how they came to the views that they held. JFK is quoted as saying, "We are not here to curse the darkness, but to light a candle." Things have been very dark for some time, but when I get a chance to hear people's stories, and sometimes to share my own, everything lightens just a bit.